Hey there! Welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we have from Johnny Blue Skies, Passage du Desir. So if you're seeing this name and are a bit confused as to who the hell it is, probably making the educated guess based off of the name that it's someone in country music because also it's me covering him, well, chances are you've heard of him before, because this is the new stage name and band of one Sturgill Simpson, one of the most critically acclaimed indie country acts of the mid-2010s. Now, if you've fallen off the map with him since the gorgeous and Grammy-nominated A Sailor's Guide to Earth in 2016, one of the best albums of that year, and the ruckus Sound and Fury, which was not one of the best of 2019, well, he's done some production and acting work. He released the two Cut and Grass projects, which are bluegrass interpretations of previous songs, and in 2021, The Ballad of Dude and Juanita, a return to his country roots on a concept album that, in retrospect, felt kind of like a half-formed, phoned-in label obligation. Now, since then, he had an unfortunate case of blowing out his vocal cords, and then embarking on a solo globe-trotting journey, which took him from a return to Thailand to the streets of Paris, where he's now living across the ocean from his family, and after announcing this project with a live return of his old band, well, none of them are performing on this new album. So okay, when you combine all of that and the wild swerves of Sturgill Simpson's careers, and so many of the rumors that have been swirling around behind the scenes, he's proven difficult, often frustrating to define, so I was curious where the hell this new album might take him, what it could reveal, and what we got is probably revealing of both too much and too little, especially for an album that I want to like a lot more than I do. So if you translate the album's title from French, it means Passage of Desire, and that feels less like a sex joke or even a deliberate reference to the seedier areas in Paris where Sturgill is haunting than this drifting feeling that he's searching for something down a long corridor that's taking him further away from the familiar. This is Sturgill Simpson at his most lonely and adrift, the most he will openly question anything, with a sort of underlying instability that reminds me a lot of Father John Misty's God's Favorite Customer from 2018. But where that album was drenched in guilt and angst, here Sturgill just kind of sounds lost, and that is accentuated rather effectively by the production, which is once again a swerve into something that's now closer to mid-70s country-adjacent soft rock, even yacht rock, like the Allman Brothers without the harmonies or Steely Dan without the rampant sleaze. In both cases, you can tell something is acutely missing, and the callback to that era feels intentional amidst an otherwise so relaxed album to highlight just how off it all feels. From the shuffling patter of the percussion to how brittle the acoustic guitars and mandolins are, to more specific examples like the faint creak of the organ and the accordion on A Swamp of Sadness, to the drippy grooves of Scooter Blues and Mint Tea. Hell, that even conveys to his delivery. In comparison with the strong Waylon Jennings-esque belting, here I don't know whether Sturgill Simpson won't or can't sing with such volume anymore. His voice sounds frail, almost precarious, and that's before it's surrounded in watery synthetic effects to only further accentuate his isolation. It's probably most awkward on Right Kinda Dream, which doesn't exactly help any of its popping hookup vibes, but I get his intention behind this. But it's also where I'm going to hit my first major problem. Going back to his best work, I have never cared for Sturgill Simpson in this vocal register. As much as the performance makes sense in theme and execution, it just doesn't really grip me. I like when Simpson can command the vibe, not feel adrift within it. And I don't think the vocal effects are blended quite well enough to really fit with the more organic grooves and orchestration. If you're making the Steely Dan comparison, this is something a Fagen, Becker, and Katz would have mostly gotten right. But that leads to the second issue. As much as I know this is going to appeal to a very middle-aged, relaxed, near dad rock vibe, where you can just be awash in the smooth textures out in the patio, the natural continuation of A Sailor's Guide to Earth, as someone who generally doesn't mind this sound but really does not like Steely Dan, the watery, over-arranged theatricality, it largely misses the rootsy country rock muscle that gave Sturgill Simpson a lot of his power. And while I know this is all the point that he's lost it, the melodic execution in these songs feels kind of hit and miss, especially on country-leaning tracks like Scooter Blues that could be given to Kenny Chesney and I don't think anyone would bat an eye. not exactly a compliment. Now, that's not saying there aren't moments where Simpson can't jam out or flex some compositional prowess. Over half of this album comfortably eclipses the 4.5-minute mark, and cuts like Jupiter's Faerie really nail that orchestral swell, and One for the Road is a great jam accented by beautiful strings, piano, and that melodica on the extended outro, a phenomenal closer. But if you're not enamored with the production or the tones, well, this is an album that really wants to remind us of 1970s faux burnout mystique. But as someone who owns a decent number of 1970s soft rock albums on vinyl, it also reminds me of the kitschier side of the poppy edges of the subgenre that have aged rather unevenly, like the rather tepid metropolitan grooves of Right Kinda Dream that runs a lot longer than it should, or just how weedy and brittle Mint Tea comes across, probably my least favorite song on the album. Now, this would be where the writing might save this, and indeed where I've seen a lot of folks praise this project, because it's roughly split halfway between songs where he is questioning his own place and identity, with probably the most workable being the country musings of Who I Am, and the love songs that largely seem forlorn and lost. Jupiter's Faerie tells how he tried to reconnect with an old flame that he shut out, but she committed suicide, so now it becomes a tribute. And One for the Road feels like the sort of breakup where there is a plea for patience as he's trying to find himself, but he ultimately knows it's over. I wish it didn't come after Mint Tea, where he tries to confront a failing relationship with this weird presumptive arrogance that only serves to remind me that Sturgill Simpson can have his petty streak as well. I remember the deep cuts on Sound and Fury. But I also think he's aware of that. Sturgill Simpson knows he's in troubled waters. He doesn't frame himself as the good guy, and it's really an open question of how much you buy into this tragic vagabond romance. And truth be told, kind of torn on it. My favorite Sturgill Simpson song is probably still Sea Stories from A Sailor's Guide to Earth, mostly because I can appreciate the dark humor of after spending so much time overseas, somewhat adrift, you wake up over a decade later at rock bottom asking what the hell you're even doing. And this album feels like a slide back into some of that wandering territory, and yeah, it enhances some of the tragedy that perhaps he was always like this, that he was never going to settle properly, it was never going to work. But that myopic focus can leave a bit of a sour tang. As Ann Powers highlighted in her excellent 2022 essay about Matty Healy, Love Songs of a Dirtbag, there's a lot of disheveled charisma that can drive that underlying emotional appeal, but it's a bit harder to stomach when you're in your mid-40s and you left your wife and 3 sons on the other side of the world, and you also have the kind of money to live on the streets of Paris. And normally I wouldn't even bring that up except for 2 factors. Number 1, he himself is using that adrift subtext to enhance the emotional stakes of this album and the bad or failing relationships. But 2, he's only presenting the part of the picture which comes with a level of artistic privilege that a lot of folks just don't have, and it muddies that sense of stakes. Compare this to when Miranda Lambert cheated on Blake Shelton, and the weight of These Wings is that painful and larger contextualization of all those decisions. Or the best example, Let It Burn by Emily Scott Robinson, where the marriage is failing and there are kids in the other room, and she is way too acutely aware of the personal and social consequences for her making that choice to leave. We never get something that weighty or poignant from Sturgill here, and that's a loss. But the line that has attracted the most attention is arguably the best lyric on the album is on Right Kinda Dream. How I wish that happiness left scars too. It's a great poetic line, but also extremely revealing in how Sturgill Simpson ponders how moments of great love never seem to impact him the way that great pain or suffering in the throes of passion have. Now that's a sentiment I feel viscerally. I get it. It makes sense in the context of a man constantly searching for that answer and desire. He's a wanderer, and that's the insanely frustrating thing about this album in theme and intent. It makes all the sense in the world. It makes complete sense how it's designed to work and fuel what he's putting forward, but in execution it's a lot spottier in both the choices made and what it chooses to leave out. And I fully admit that part of this comes from my own mixed record when it comes to reviving these specific soft rock sounds of the 70s, especially when they dabble in psychedelia. I also know why critics the world over, especially guys my age or a little bit older, are gonna adore this album. To quote Stephen Hayden, it's a great patio album, the sort of chill, debonair escapism with just enough of a darker edge to be self-aware of consequences, but not so much that it kills the vibe. It's that tragic romance. And you know what? There are points where Simpson is so good as a performer and composer that it nearly gets there, but at least for me, not nearly enough. I'll say it's worth a listen. It's certainly an interesting project, and I can imagine for a lot of folks it's gonna appeal a lot more, especially if you like Steely Dan. Just for me, kind of take it or leave it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Again, this is going to be one of those contentious reviews, I just know it. But again, I really wanted to love this project, and it just bounces off me in a really ugly way. And I know some folks are going to bring up the conversation about separate the art and the artist, or only review the album you get, not the one you want. But again, when you are introducing some of that artistic subtext onto the album to drive the drama of your performance, what you leave out becomes very interesting to me. And as much as that is a private, personal detail between him and his family, I'm not going to disparage him that. It is context you really can't ignore, especially for a man of his age. I'm just going to say it out there. And honestly, if the performance was better, I probably would just be able to ignore it, but I don't think it is. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you all want to get involved in seeing more of my videos going forward, helping support the channel, getting albums on my schedule, getting access to my Discord, or hell, a big upcoming project that I'm sure some of y'all want to have been long anticipation of, link to my Patreon is right over there. Don't feel obligated. Tough times, I understand. The option is available. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.